I'm Sam.
And this is Gabe.
And this is Coaster Wars.
All right, welcome back to the Coaster Wars podcast, the podcast where we take two coasters and compare them to each other. Today, we got a really, really good matchup, the Battle of Kings Island.
Yeah, these are two, again, ones you probably wouldn't normally compare to each other, but they are at the same park, so I think it's actually a good idea to maybe kind of battle it out and see who might be the better coaster. But as you also could see in previous episodes, me and Gabe don't always agree, so we'll see how this goes.
two coasters really on the opposite ends of the spectrum, age-wise, as well as design-wise, as well as element-wise. But yeah, like you said, they're at the same park. I do think these two coasters get mentioned more together than you would think just because they are at the same park.
Okay.
And they're both, flagship rides for Kings Island, I would say.
Yeah, that's a very good point. They're two very big rides. I think one is a little bit more focused on airtime, but they both have airtime moments on them. I think one is, I guess this may be a question for you, but one of them is maybe a little bit more intense, but that might just also be the style of the ride, so.
I think some of that's just the style and the aspects of the ride. But without further ado, should we introduce our two fighters today?
Absolutely.
All right. In the blue corner, standing at a height of 110 feet and reaching a top speed of 64 miles per hour. Hailing from the farm fields of Ohio and the Kings Island Gym, it is the Beast. In the red corner, standing at a height of 215 feet, reaching a top speed of 80 miles per hour. Also hailing from the farm fields of Ohio and the B&M Gym, it is Diamondback. Let the fight begin. So in this Coaster Wars, I am bringing Diamondback to this one.
And I am bringing the Beast.
Two really good coasters. That's one thing I'd like to come right off the bat and say, regardless of who we pick as a winner today, these are two extremely good coasters in my opinion. One might be a little bit more underrated than the other. Diamondback I'd actually consider maybe a little bit overrated as a roller coaster, but two really good rides, definitely.
And I feel like the Beast is a little bit more of a historical ride. It was built in 1979, and at the time that it was built, it was, of course, the tallest and the fastest, but it was also the longest, which is a record it still holds to this day. It is 7,361 feet long, and to keep its speed through that entire thing, it has 2 lift hills.
Yeah, for sure. There is an asterisk. It's only the longest wooden roller coaster.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
There is a steel one that is longer. So, but yeah, to be built in 1979 and still to this day hold the record for the world's longest roller coaster is a crazy feat. Normally, especially back in the 90s and the early 2000s, when a roller coaster broke a record, it maybe held that for a record for a year or maybe 2 years at the most, and then another coaster came along to knock it off that throne. But this roller coaster is still, to this day, the world's longest wooden roller coaster. And I think that really needs to be said here in this podcast, is that that's a crazy feat to hold that record for how long it's held it for.
Oh, absolutely. And then also to speak, it is also one of the last wooden giants left. And this is a concept I'm not really familiar of. The only other one that I know of is American Eagle, but I do know that these coasters aren't being found as much as they were.
They're all getting RMC'd is what's going on. No. So the wooden giants are coasters like American Eagle at Six Flags Great America. You got Mean Streak at Cedar Point, which was torn down and is now Steel Vengeance. You have the Texas Giant down at Six Flags Over Texas, which is now the new Texas Giant. You have the Rattler at Six Flags Fiesta Texas, which is now the Iron Rattler. So you have Colossus out at Magic Mountain, which is now Twisted Colossus, another RMC. So that's what a lot of these parks are doing, is they're taking their old dilapidated, wooden giants, and they're changing them into an RMC, basically completely revamping the ride. And I love RMCs. Don't stop RMCing roller coasters, but we're also starting to lose some of these massive wooden roller coasters. Really, the only two that are left are American Eagle and the Beast.
Yeah, to explain a term really quick, if you're not familiar with all of the things that, all the lingo, RMC coaster, RMC is a roller coaster company, and just to give a really dumbed down version of what they do, is like Gabe said, they tear down old, dilapidated wooden roller coasters, and they put up a new hybrid coaster that's got wooden supports, and then it features their custom is it their iBox track? Is that what it's called?
Yeah, most of the roller coasters feature the iBox track, and that's usually what they use in the conversions.
That's just a really, really, really short version of what RMCing means, just in case nobody knew.
Basically, what they do though is they keep the original station. They keep they at least try to keep the original layout of the roller coaster, or at least some semblance of it, and they reuse the structure. So all they do is add, structure to the top of the roller coaster to either make it taller or steeper or whatever. And then they usually add a couple inversions and they make it way more intense than the original layout was.
Yes. So, Beast is one of the ones that this has not been done to. So this is still the original. This was actually designed in-house at Kings Island. And it features the PTC trains, which we've mentioned these before. They're the original wooden roller coaster trains. You see them on almost every wooden coaster out there. Um, and to go into the layout of this coaster just a little bit real quick, you begin with a spiral out of the station, which is around an American flag, which is kind of cool. And that runs you right into that lift hill, which then plunges you down 135 feet into the first tunnel on the ride, which then sends you racing through the woods. After a little time back there, you pass into a covered shed, and I say covered shed because it's not a fully enclosed tunnel, but it does have like a roof over it and stuff, and that also doubles as a brake run. And then you go through the woods again. You're building more speed, and that leads through a second tunnel, which is 269 feet long. And after you leave that tunnel, you go into a couple more turns before you enter that second lift hill. And that one is 110 feet tall. It's a 141-foot drop. And that one, but the catch with this one is that it's not a straight down drop that you normally get on a wooden coaster. It's actually only 18 degrees, and it's like a slow climb as you gather speed, which then leads into the 560-degree helix on this ride, and which then leads into the final brake run in the station of this ride.
It's the second lift hill into the finale helix, whatever you want to call it. That is one of the most intense moments you can find on any wooden roller coaster, let alone one from 1979. Like, it's a crazy experience, and it's something that is really hard to describe without actually being on the roller coaster, I think. We're going to have a struggle describing it for you guys. But it is an intense moment,
Yes.
I think. And I think it's the best part of the roller coaster, in my opinion. Would you agree with that?
Oh, yes, it really is. It's the most intense. You really feel the speed that you're gathering. And then I don't know if I mentioned this, but it also is in a tunnel as well. I don't think it's completely dark in there, but it is definitely a lot less light during the day, and it adds a little just extra element to you just speeding around. And something that should be mentioned with this ride is that it is legendary for its night rides, which would obviously make that tunnel so much darker. um, and I'm actually really sad to say that when me and Gabe were there, we didn't get a night ride on it, and it still makes my list at number 11. I can't imagine where this ride would sit if I was able to get a night ride on it.
Yeah, the thing about this roller coaster that's really different from a lot of other rides is you can see the station and you can see that first spiral that you were talking about and you can see the initial lift hill. But after that, the rest of this roller coaster is hidden from the park. And the best way to describe it is it's a terrain coaster. That's really what the heart and soul of this ride is. And the cool part about it is you can't really get a good idea of what the layout is unless you go way up in the Sky Tower. And even up in the Sky Tower, it's really hard to see this roller coaster because it's surrounded by trees and stuff. So to get an idea of this ride experience, you actually have to physically ride the roller coaster. And I think
Yes.
that's a cool thing. I think, I like a little bit of surprise in my roller coasters, and this is one that definitely has some surprise to it just because you can't get an idea just looking at it.
So yeah, it really so going to like the theming of this ride just a little bit. The whole story behind this ride is that it's an old mining facility in a place called Rivertown, which is a section of the park that the ride is located, and it's been abandoned. And there's rumors of this dangerous creature that lurks around by locals, and all they call it is the Beast. And so, but what you're in is in a mine car, or what it's supposed to be mimicking is a mine car, and so you really get that feeling. Like it's like the scenes you see in movies when you're riding in a mine car and they just go like zooming all over the place in this track, and it really actually emphasizes that feeling because like you said, you're in the back of the woods, you can't see the rest of the track, and it just feels like you're going forward at immense speed and you're zooming all over the place and you're going over hills and there's small turns, and it really is a great ride. And with the added effect of a night ride, you can't see where the heck you're going, so that just makes it adds a certain level of intensity. And again, I'm so mad that we didn't get a night ride. I'm going back to this park and I'm getting a night ride on this stinking roller coaster that kills me.
Well, one thing that me and you have discovered is we do a lot of our roller coaster trips in the summer when it's nice out, when you actually want to be at an amusement park. The problem is most amusement parks are only open about till 10 p.m. And if you're going to an amusement park in the middle of July, it don't get dark till 10.
Oh,
So it becomes a struggle to get night rides and stuff. However, this roller coaster, even without the night ride, I still think it's a great experience. The cool thing is they have taken the time to retrack this roller coaster time and time again, reprofile it, make it better, and update it, a little bit to current times. And it's not a rough experience. Definitely, I wouldn't call it rough. And that's cool in my opinion because they've really taken care of this ride, and I think it's a staple of Kings Island's lineup, and they really want it to stick around. And so, in order to have it stick around, they got to take care of the roller coaster. I think they've done a really good job with that.
oh yeah, and to talk about that retracking and stuff, a couple just kind of fun facts. In 2022, it was actually retracked, and they added an additional 2 feet of track, so much longer. So the 7,361 feet was only as of 2022. It was actually technically 7,000 or 7,359 feet. Yeah, I can't do math. 7,359 feet. But so they did that. And another thing that they changed too is the tunnel that goes around the helix. And now I don't have a year on this, but the tunnel that's around the helix actually used to be two separate tunnels. And they joined that to just make one giant tunnel that goes all the way around the whole entire helix. So,
Yeah, and I don't think we've talked about that Helix enough yet. It's really a good experience, and like you said, so the drop off the second lift hill is not a normal roller coaster drop. Like you said, it's a really gradual climb. So basically, what happens is you kind of get lulled to sleep a little bit as you're approaching this Helix because you go up the lift hill and something we have to mention, these lift hills are slow. They take a while.
yes.
Even though
Yes.
they're only 100 and some feet, it takes probably a full minute to get up these lift hills. So it kind of lulls you to sleep a little bit, You're going up the lift hill, you're kind of falling asleep, getting rocked back and forth, and then you turn and go towards the helix, and it's just a gradual drop, and you're like, what is this? What is this? Is this even a roller coaster at this point? And all of a sudden it's kind of like a light switch is how I compare it to. All of a sudden you're doing like 55 60 miles per hour at the bottom of this drop, and you're getting whipped through this helix, and you're like, you went from like 4 miles an hour to 60 miles an hour, and you kind of don't realize the transition to that speed until you hit the tunnel part. And it really kind of catches you off guard, especially because it's just a shallow drop. You're not really expecting that much, but it's long enough that you still actually get to carry some speed at the bottom of it. And then it pulls some forces. It pulls some G forces at the bottom of that helix. And then you go up to the top. As you're going through it, it kind of rises back up. It slows down and kind of like, oh, it's over. And then, nope, it just throws you right back into the bottom of the rest of the helix, and you get another really good dose of G forces before ending the roller coaster. And it's by far one of the greatest grand finales to any roller coaster ever, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, thinking about the double lift hills, I could see how when you just hear double lift hills, you would think it would mess with the pacing of this ride. But what the Beast does is it takes that first lift hill and it sends you basically through an entire roller coaster that could be its own roller coaster. Like it doesn't need the second lift hill and helix, but then like Gabe said, you get a little bit of a break. It carries you up this little, or not little, this giant but very slow lift hill, and then it drops you in. And like you said, you just slowly kind of get that speed at first, and you start building and building and building, and you don't really realize how fast you're going until you hit that helix and you get that little turn that then applies all those G's to you, and you're like, holy cow, I'm actually moving. And then it just keeps going and keeps going. It's not just 360 degrees, it's 560. It's almost two full rotations. And then it's just a really, like you said, intense part of the ride, and it's an amazing grand finale to what was already an amazing roller coaster. So,
Yeah, the thing with the Beast, it's definitely you love it or you hate it. Don't go in expecting El Toro because this is not that roller coaster. It's not on the same level, I don't think. But don't go in and hate this ride for the wrong reasons. If you take the ride for what it is, it's a really good roller coaster. Being built in 1979, being a classic, being the record holder, and all that stuff. If you come in on that aspect, you're going to love this roller coaster. But if you come in expecting, this crazy, out of control, intense experience for the whole ride, it's not that. So you have to really appreciate this roller coaster for what it is. I appreciate it just because of the historical aspect of this roller coaster, being the first of the wooden giants, being one of the last ones still standing, and also being the longest. So for me, that alone, I really appreciate this roller coaster. Um, Shifting gears, I think, are we ready to talk about Diamondback a little bit?
there is one thing I just wanted to mention with the Beast real quick, and this really is just a side note, but as kind of a publicity stunt, and then to add a new ride to the park, there was in 2000 the release of Son of Beast, which was a hybrid wooden steel coaster that had a huge vertical loop in it. And we might eventually talk about this coaster one day, but the whole point is that this is the now defunct coaster that had the loop removed after issues, and then the whole ride was torn out. So they tried to make like a kind of a number two of the Beast, and that thing is completely gone now, and the Beast is still here. So it really, I think it stands the test of time. But yes, let's switch gears.
Oh, I could talk for days about Son of Beast. There's a lot about that roller coaster that is just really interesting and kind of you can pick apart and stuff. The one thing I like to mention about Son of Beast is it's the only wooden roller coaster to break the 200-foot mark, and to this day that is still true. But yeah, that roller coaster had a ton of issues and stuff, but I think that's definitely one we can talk about in a future episode for
Yeah.
sure. But shifting gears to Diamondback, my second best B&M Hyper, which a lot of people would tell me I'm stupid for saying that. A lot of people say this is the best. This is the best B&M Hyper out there. I disagree. However, it is still a top tier B&M Hyper. I consider it my second best, which is definitely not a knock on the ride in my opinion. I just have one that I like a little bit better. But the cool thing about this roller coaster is it's kind of unique a little bit. It's not just a traditional out and back layout. A lot of B&M Hypers are an out and back layout, or they're an L-shaped layout. They don't have a lot of turns, and I think that takes away from the ride experience, in my opinion at least. But with this roller coaster, you have turns, but you also have some of the best sustained floater airtime moments on any roller coaster. And I think that's a really, I think that's why a lot of people love this ride. It's just the absolute sustained airtime. Like the 5 second airtime hill, that's just crazy.
That's insane. To talk about B&M Hypers, B&M is a really reliable company and Hyper is a really popular model. So a lot of theme parks that you will go to will have some version of a B&M Hyper. And so as a result, me and Gabe have also ridden a lot of B&M Hypers. And to say that this is one of the best is really a compliment and a testament to what kind of ride this is, because we love airtime and we love B&M Hypers and they're a good classic ride. But like he was saying, this I mean, for it to make our top 15 list, this actually is a really good ride for what it is. So
For sure. You know, a wise man once said you could never go wrong with a B&M Hyper. And that's a true statement. You know, they're all good rides. The thing with B&M Hypers, though, that I say
yes.
is they're all average rides. They're all, you know, they're good. They're not bad, but they're average. They're not the best. They're not the most intense. But with Diamondback, you could argue it is on a different level. It is better. It is more intense. And it is more unique. And that's what I like. Because a lot of the B&M Hypers are just copy and paste, like I said, traditional layouts. And Diamondback and Raging Bull are really the two that stand out for me, just because they're not this boring old layout. The cool thing about Diamondback that I love is a lot of the twists and turns in this roller coaster are done at ground level, which makes them feel more intense and makes you feel a little bit more G-forces. Um, Diving right into the layout, let's just do that right away. So you have the lift hill, 200-foot tall lift hill, like all hypers are, over 200 feet. And you drop down, and after the first drop, you have a slight twist. So you get a little bit of laterals, and you also get the G-forces and a pullout, and that's where you pop up into the 5 second airtime hill. 5 seconds of sustained floater airtime. And then after dropping off that airtime hill into the next pullout, once again, it has a little bit of a twist in the opposite direction. So you get laterals and G-forces before popping up into another airtime hill. After the second airtime hill is when you hit the first turnaround. This is an elevated turnaround, the only one on the roller coaster that's elevated. So you go up in the air, you turn 180 degrees, and you come back down. It's kind of like an overbank turn that you would see something like on Millennium Force. After that, you hit another airtime hill before hitting a 360-degree kind of helix turn type thing. It's more of a turn than a helix because you don't really elevate or lose elevation. But it's really low to the ground, which is carries your speed through, and that's where you pop up into the mid-course break run. And then after that, you drop off and you hit another turn, and then you have back-to-back airtime hills before you hit a helix. So this is an actual helix where you gain elevation as you go through it. And after you drop off the helix is when you drop into the splashdown. Another unique thing about this roller coaster that I really love. And after the splashdown, you pop up into the final breaks. It's a great experience from start to finish. It's not a coaster that really has any dull spots. Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah, this I mean, just listen to that layout. It does not feel like it has any straight track into it, because even moments where it's not a I mean, hills are technically straight, but you're still doing something. It's not just literally straight pieces of track. So with all those turns and stuff, like you said, it has really great pacing. And that to talk about that splashdown a little bit, when I was doing research, I found out that B&M does have splashdowns, but they're usually not reserved for their hyper models. So it really is an especially unique element on this ride.
Yeah, B&M does splashdowns and some of their other roller coasters. The cool thing that I always tell people about this ride is it's an actual splashdown. So some splashdowns, the track is built into the water, but it's just jets inside the pond that create the effect of a splash. Where this roller coaster actually has scoops on the back car that create the splashdown. So it's actually the movement of the train that actually creates it. And I think that's something that is really understated, that I really love. And I believe it's the only hyper to have a splashdown, like you were saying. And it's an awesome picture moment because it's right by the walkway. So you can get really good pictures of it as it's going through the water. It just looks really cool. It's a cool visual moment. But you also get a little bit of like break force because it's actually scooping the water, which is something that I think is cool. I don't know. I nerd out about that kind of stuff. So,
Well, yeah,
but yeah, it's a
to speak to like the mechanical side of what the splashdown does is it actually acts as a brake run in this ride. It slows down the train, and they've accounted for that when they engineered this ride, which is also a cool thing to think about.
Oh, for sure. I definitely think this roller coaster is a little bit overrated. In my opinion, I think a lot of people hold it in higher regards. I was a little bit disappointed when I rolled the roller coaster, but that's because I was expecting, a top five ride experience when maybe it's only a top 10. But comparing it to the rest of the hypers that I've ridden, it is definitely one of the best. So don't say it's a bad roller coaster because that would be incorrect. It's a really good ride. I just think it might be slightly overrated.
Yeah, me and we like to talk about well, like Gabe said before, you can't go wrong with the B&M Hyper, and there really isn't a such thing as a bad one. I guess to mention another B&M Hyper, I did ride Candemonium at Hershey Park, and I don't know if it was because it was cooler out or if it was just because it was a morning ride. But the first time I rode it, I was like, I didn't think there was a Bat B&M Hyper, but I think I might have found it. I did ride it later in the day, and I got a back row ride, and it was better, but it's still, I think it's at the bottom of my list for B&M Hypers. So
Yeah, and I never got to ride Candemonium. However, I've ridden the first B&M Hyper, Apollo's Chariot, out at Busch Gardens, Williamsburg, and that one is another one that was incredibly disappointing. And some of it, I think, is our first B&M Hyper we ever experienced is my favorite B&M Hyper, which we'll mention later in this list. So we've had really good B&M Hyper experiences. So when we get on one that might not necessarily be the best, it kind of disappoints us a little bit.
yeah, we're kind of jaded in that we've experienced something really
We're
good.
spoiled.
Yeah, we really are. So
We're spoiled. But with that, we've reached kind of our time here where we got to pick a winner. Would you like to go first?
oh, this is an easy one. I'm going with Beast. I This is a personal favorite of mine. I love Woodies, and I've come to really love terrain coasters. And I've reserved this ride of what I call hat privileges. I don't wear very many hats, but this is one where I actually bought a souvenir for the ride, so it holds a special place in my heart. I really love this ride.
For sure. I'm going to be honest with you. This was a tough one. This was a really tough one. The Beast did not make my top 15, mostly just because I have other interests in a ride just besides history and terrain coasters. But, really getting down to the nitty gritty and thinking about it, it was tough. But at the end of the day, I am an airtime guy. I love airtime. And I think that's what's going to put Diamondback over the top for me on this one. Is I really, really like airtime. It was tough though to just completely throw away the history. I'm a history buff, and the Beast has a ton of that. So it was really tough for me to bury all that and say, "Oh, I like airtime." But I'm gonna have to take Diamondback in this one, just because of the airtime moments and just the overall size of this roller coaster. Both of them are big coasters, but in different ways. Um, but yeah, I'm gonna take Diamondback, unfortunately, on this one.
Sounds really good. What do we have next on the docket for us?
That's a good question. So the Beast and Diamondback were number 11. So we're breaking the top 10. Woohoo!
Woohoo!
Okay, let's see. Number 10. Oh, we have a repeat offender for your list. And my list, we have something different, something we haven't really talked about on this podcast yet. So that'll be cool. What should we call that? Let's see. Well, you could reuse the name that we use, so you could call it Speed. Well, Speed versus Intensity Part 2, I think. That would be a good way to explain those two roller coasters.
It would be good because, like you said, this is a repeat offender, so part two is a very good way to name this episode.
Yeah, unfortunately, though, my roller coaster that will be appearing, you have not gotten to experience, so that'll be tough to kind of convince you, I think.
Yeah, we'll have to see how it goes. You're very good at arguing points, though, so we'll see.
Well, my coaster is one of the best of its kind, and you really like this kind of roller coaster, I think. So I don't think it's going to be too hard, to be honest.
All right.
So with that, we'll see you guys next week.